Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today for the launch event for the Just Out Today Ensemble, Using the Power of Improv and Play to Forge Connections in a Lonely World by Jeff Katzman, MD, and Dan O'Connor, published by the fabulous Berkeley-based North Atlantic Books. My name is Evan Karp. I'm the events manager for Booksmith. We're an independent bookstore and a mainstay of San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district since 1976. I'm happy to introduce the authors. Jeff Katzman is a professor of psychiatry at the University of New Mexico, serves as vice chair and director of an international program on psychological resilience training, and maintains a private practice. He previously directed behavioral healthcare services at the New Mexico VA healthcare system and programs for veterans with PTSD in Los Angeles. He holds multiple leadership roles in the American Academy of Dynamic Psychiatry and Psychoanalysis and is a board member of the Mentalizing Initiative in Los Angeles. Katzman has applied improvisational theater with interdisciplinary hospital teams, psychiatric trainees, psychotherapists, and patients. Dan O'Connor is a multifaceted actor, improviser, writer, and director working in television and stage around the world. He graduated from the Webber Douglas Academy of Dramatic Art in London and has trained with the American Conservatory Theater and Keith Johnstone since 1986. O'Connor is the founder and producing artistic director of Improv Theater and co-founded BATS Improv in San Francisco and also LA Theater Sports. For 30 years, he's trained writers, actors, and directors in narrative storytelling and has taught corporate clients to use improvisation as a tool for adaptation and change. Jeff and Dan, huge congratulations to you both on the book launch today, and we're really happy to have you both here. And I'm happy to turn it over to you. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Evan. Thanks very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Evan. Really appreciate it. Hey, Dan. Happy book birthday.
Yes, happy book birthday.
Yeah.
That's right. It's the first day it's out. So we should probably, what Jeff and I would like to do is sort of introduce how this book and our first book, Life Unscripted, came to be, and talk specifically about Ensemble and our origin story, a little bit about the book, and then take some of your questions if people have questions about the book. This work is sort of brand new to a large section of society, and Jeff and I have been proselytizing where we can about the applications, and specifically about the fact that a lot of people think of improv as being a performance tool, and really what Jeff and I are doing in our books is to talk about its application to everybody's life and how we all improvise every day, and yet most of us are never taught how to improvise. Jeff, I'll throw it over to you.
Great. We can talk a little bit about how the two of us came to be an ensemble and friends 35 years ago now, I think, somewhere in there. And I had taken an improv class at Second City and had some group of others who were interested in improv that had heard about a weekend workshop at Los Angeles Theater Sports. And so we joined Dan and we learned from him. And it was really the group learning improv and the weekend, Dan, with you, what do we remember from 35 years ago? But I remember it vividly. I even remember some scenes that we did that weekend. So I learned then that improv really is a way that we connect. And I started thinking about it with patients, with what I was learning in a psychiatry residency at the time. And I remember telling one of my faculty, I think I'm learning really more about how to communicate and connect and interact with people here doing improv than I am necessarily in reading books.
And Jeff was, while he was taking class with me way back when, in the dawn of time, he was also applying, like Jeff just said, applying a lot of this to the work he was doing at the VA, taking some of the improv exercises that we were doing at Theater Sports and applying that sort of game playing with folks at the VA, with patients at the VA. So that started a conversation between Jeff and I over the years of how much we both realized that the skills that we were doing on stage, doing improvisation, we're also applying to everything in our lives, from our friend ensembles, our family ensembles, our dating adventures at the time, way back when. So there was a very, the connection for both of us was immediate in the energy that we had to do this. So we finally, 5-6 years ago, came around to writing our first book and unpacking a lot of these skills. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with improvisation, my theater company down in Los Angeles does full-length improvised plays in the style of Shakespeare, Jane Austen, what have you, with sets and props and costumes. And that type of narrative improvisation goes to storytelling, goes to play, but it really applies to what we do off stage with regards to how we interact. On stage, all we have is each other and the moment. And if you think about it, those types of interactions on stage actually apply to good relationships off stage. So.
Yeah, I want to add there that I think after we had, originally met and I was doing stuff with theater sports, I moved to New Mexico, and maybe there was about 10 years in there or something like that. We didn't have much contact. It was kind of pre-texts, pre-cell phone days. And then you and I connected again. And I just kind of want to mark that as we talk here a little bit, as reach out to an old friend, and you never know what will come of it. Because we all kind of go through life and meet various people and we lose touch. And I remember even thinking sometimes like, wow, you know what, this person's still alive. I wonder what they're up to, and just reconnecting with them. And I sure glad that we met for that cup of coffee. And everything you're saying is right on, that the guides of improv completely translate into the guides of how we interact with people. And nobody ever teaches it. We learn all kinds of stuff like calculus and every subject in school and ancient history, but nobody talks about how to interact with someone spontaneously in a hallway. And
to really listen to somebody else. And that's been even more important during this past year and change, people wanting to reach out and connect with other people. The question we get a lot is why improvisation with regards to self-help and engagement tools. So I just want to read a paragraph from our book that Jeff and I think kind of distills what we're talking about. Improvisation gives us the opportunity to practice both tuning into our own impulses and imagination, as well as tracking and joining the ideas coming from those around us. This is a skill that is critical in life. To get along, we really need to be able to both tune into what we are feeling, as well as understand the experiences of those around us as best we can. So in our mind, that is a real distillation of what we're unpacking in the book and explaining in the book with regards to how to ensemble, how to engage with other people and make your relationships that much more deep and resonant and connected.
And you can imagine us, Jan and I, having these conversations a couple times a week about how people connect at a time where we were all thrown into our own homes and quarantined, and in the time of this pandemic we've all been living through in the past 14 months. So at a time that we were connecting, also improv had gone online, and we were really wanting so badly to connect with other people, so that actually what we were writing about, we were feeling deeply inside, this deep desire to connect. We began to get very interested in the whole idea of loneliness and what we were experiencing and what everyone we knew were feeling in terms of feeling detached. And in researching loneliness, I mean, the body of information out there is very large, but it's important to know that it really is an epidemic in our Western world, and it does great damage not only to us psychologically, but physically, is akin to smoking somewhere around 15 cigarettes a day and has all of the same long-term health risks. So we need to connect. We need to connect for ourselves psychologically, to not feel the detachment that a lot of us have felt over the past 14 months. And we need to know how to do that and know what are effective ways to connect. So just like Dan saying, we came up with an idea that actually there's an art to ensembling, and we looked it up and it didn't exist as a verb, the word to ensemble. So we got to make it up a little bit, what it meant. And it meant really kind of what Dan said. How do we connect with each other? How do we show up, stay present, and reach deep inside ourselves to understand what's going on within us at the same time that we can be empathic to another person and understand their point of view and balance those two perspectives.
One of the core things in improvisation is active listening. For those of you who remember working in an office or working in any sort of organization where you are required to go to meetings, this is a very familiar feeling where you are watching somebody talk, but you're basically waiting for their mouth to stop moving so you can say the thing you've been thinking about while you haven't been listening to them. It's a familiar dynamic. I know I've been guilty of it before, but the tools of improvisation are about being actively engaged and making your partner look good and really listening to what they're saying and responding. And one of the things we try and unpack in the book is the idea of how active listening not only feels good to you because you're getting the information you need in order to create the narrative that exists between you and whoever you're talking to, but it also puts the other person in a space of feeling safe, that you're really listening to them, that you're really connected to them. Every relationship is a story, and how well you tell that story directly relates the bottom line of how resonant that relationship is. That's true when you're on stage creating something out of nothing. It's also true when you're talking to someone. The way we engage in the world as thinking mammals, reasoning mammals, is through story. If Jeff and I didn't know each other and we met at a party, we would exchange our stories together. Where are you from? We're in San Francisco. The first thing I would ask is, where'd you go to high school? These tools, which help to create more resonant relationships and better stories between people, are not something we think about every day. And so what we've done with the book, the structure of the book, is to look at distilling these skill sets, these tools, through using exercises, stories, quotes from other writers. As Jeff said, there is mountains of information about the epidemic of loneliness. The UK has gone so far as to make a cabinet level secretary the Minister of Loneliness. So we talk a lot about how people around the world are dealing with this and using improvisation and narrative skills to combat that and to begin ensembling. So the first 2/3 of the book are about getting in touch with your own ensemble, because obviously you are the first member of your ensemble. And then the the last third is about family and workplace ensembles and how those dynamics shift and change.
And each chapter really, or most of the chapters really begin with a character. Dan has taught improvisation groups to people like me for decades, and I've worked with trainees for decades, and we've come to know a lot of different kinds of people and how they show up in groups. So each chapter starts with a kind of person and a tendency. So some of us may tend to not focus on ourselves and focus on other people more, but when we're in a group, we may not share much about ourselves, and other people might be very good at sharing about themselves, but not quite as good at getting curious about another person. And so we take you through a little bit of the lives of some of these characters as we introduce each chapter.
And the different cohorts of people that we talk about all have different challenges with regards to how they connect. One of the things we also look at is when you're part of an ensemble that maybe you need to get out of. Maybe it's not healthy for you to remain there because of various reasons. So this connection that we need, this is one of the things that we've discovered at Improv Theater down in LA. over the last 20 years, there's a number of people who take class with us, not because they want to be the next Wayne Brady, not because they want to be a better actor or writer or director, though there's a huge cohort of people who want to do that. There's also a great many people who just want to connect. And this is their book club, this is their chess club, this is their weekly event where they get to come and tell stories and engage with other people. And that was one of the inspirations for us writing both books, actually. It was the idea that most of the reason for people coming was to connect.
Yeah, and another point that we really make in the book is one about the importance of play. And I think that's what I've really learned from Dan, from improvisation in general. When I'm doing it, I'm playing actually, and I'm making mistakes and goofing up, and it makes me a different person really at work, and within relationships, a little more playful. And it turns out that we're born to play and to interact and to collaborate, and we want that. A baby in their first months of life, they want to gaze back and forth with a parent and regulate each other and give an offer that's responded to. And we need that. That's really the beginning of play. My favorite quote that Dan shared with me from one of his mentors and the great improv master, Keith Johnstone, he said, adults are atrophied children. And really, that's what we're writing about, that many of us have forgotten how to play, and we have to remember, we're not in play groups. We're not in natural ensembles. The ensembles that we have as children, well, in adulthood, they don't exist quite in the same way. We have to learn how to play with each other. And we do have some exercises, some takeaways about how to introduce a sense of play in the various groups that you're in, online with different Zoom activities that you can do to mess things up a little bit and to actually get to know each other a little bit more, rather than another meeting on Zoom with the same structure that people can get really Zoom fatigue from.
So Jeff, I wanted to ask about perspective taking, since you're the pro. What is perspective taking and how can we cultivate it? Because I know we talk about it in the book, but a lot of people may not know what we're talking about.
Yeah, so it's so important. Really, perspective taking means, can I take my own perspective? Can I get what's going on within me? And can I get what's going on within you? And can I get curious about it? And can we collaborate back and forth about that? But, we make, in the chapter that we write about in the community, we were also writing at a time when in the summer where there was a lot going on with a failure of perspective taking back and forth. So we write about how important it is actually to get to know people around you, to get to know your neighbors and what they're all about. I wrote about a great lesson I had in the book from a presentation I had made, and I was the presenter and the improv teacher, which I wasn't so accustomed to. And there were maybe 25 people there, and one individual was in a wheelchair. And as we led the improv games, I was wondering how this was going to work, and nobody was offering him the zip and zap that we were doing. And he stopped us and he said, I can do this, and explained, and it kind of woke everyone up, like, oh, there's some kind of bias here that's preventing play here. And he was a remarkable person. And when I shared the story with somebody else who's a master at what's called mentalizing and reflective functioning, they asked me, well, so what would you have wanted to do different next time to set that all up? And I thought, oh, we can really do that, can't we? We can think about our mistakes, how we might do it better next time, without getting angry at ourselves or bashing ourselves one way or another. And that's how we learn. And so I think perspective taking is knowing ourselves, knowing another person, and getting curious, and then rolling with our mistakes so we can learn from each other.
And that's a core value in improvisation, which is that mistakes are gifts. Obviously, if you're a brain surgeon, you don't want to make mistakes. But Jeff and I are talking, and improv teachers in general are talking about simple mistakes. The idea that a lot of times we castigate ourselves, or we feel shame for making mistakes. And one of the things that we're talking about and trying to teach is the idea that if I make a mistake, it's an opportunity for me to learn from it. We think about so much of education is about trial and error, and switching your mind around so that you look at making a mistake not as the end of the world, but as the possibility of a new door to walk through. I know for a fact that when we first started out doing improvisation way back when in LA, that sometimes we couldn't get people to come to shows because they didn't want to see people in pain. And one of the things that Keith Johnstone taught us way back when is fail good-naturedly. The idea that I'm on stage and I'm failing good-naturedly and having a good time and using the mistake as a gift. Anybody who's seen the Carol Burnett show, for anybody who's that old on the call, remembers most of their comedy was from mistakes. But we also started taking this work into corporate situations where we talked about executive presence training and using these skills that are in the books with regards to, you make a mistake and you're okay with it, then the rest of the mammals in the audience are going to be okay because you're okay. And to, yes, and basically that mistake can keep moving. So a lot of this is about taking things more slowly and being more present with each other. The idea that, I may have something at the end of the week that I've got to deal with, but if I'm talking to Jeff and obsessing about that, I'm not doing this engagement, this moment any good, because I'm actually somewhere else. So talking about these things and bringing us back to the moment. There's a great correlation between improvisation on your feet to mindfulness in meditation. In meditation, people are taught, if you have ideas, come back to the breath, come back to the breath, come back to the breath. In improvisation, off stage and on, I'm going to, if I start to drift away while I'm having a conversation with Jeff, I'm going to come back to Jeff, come back to Jeff, come back to Jeff, and give him my full attention. In improv, we have lots of rules and guidelines, but the top two for me are make your partner look good and serve the story. Why are we here to engage? What are we talking about? Let's serve that goal. And also let's serve each other. One of the things that happens is if I'm putting my attention on Jeff and supporting him, to a certain extent, it takes the ego and anxiety that I might be foisting upon myself if I'm getting too self-obsessed. And I use that energy and think about, how can I help Jeff? How can I be a better partner in this moment to Jeff? So the skills of narrative improvisation unpacked and laid out in our book are about not performance, but engagement with each other, being more compassionate and being a better listener and a better partner.
Yeah, so well put. I want to add that this experience of ensembling is also really a feeling, is a feeling of expansion and wanting to reach out. I'd say the opposite, and we write about this, is maybe what you feel at a food court at a busy airport, where you're getting your food, and if you can imagine pre-pandemic times, and you are shut down looking at your cell phone and don't want others to interact with you, and you're not going to interact with them. We're kind of talking about the opposite, about saying hello and greeting somebody at the checkout at the market, or somebody that you're passing in a hallway, that actually we are all human beings born to connect, yet in so many ways we're trained not to connect, because then we're going to get into some big story or something. And, some people can really feel lonely, and because nobody calls me or nobody invited me to a party, when we can always reciprocate and get interested in other people or invite other people. And it's up to us to really want to connect with people. And we can't wait for people to connect with us.
Yeah, well, what I was thinking of one of our improv T-shirts maybe that we should have printed up, which is if you're interested, you're interesting. If I'm curious about you, that opens a level of engagement and safety in our communication. So Jeff and I think are proponents of the fact of empathy and curiosity being core skill sets to life. Being empathetic and being curious about other people, and it does. Some of us are introverts, and talking to a stranger is or engaging with somebody sometimes might seem like the end of the world. But there are ways that we can engage, and there are ways that we can, I guess, connect.
Yeah, even when we're so mad at somebody about something in our family or a friend, or they did something and they hurt our feelings in some way, or that we can reach inside and say, well, maybe there's a more complex picture here. Or maybe we can understand another person's point of view so that we can actually reach out and try to restore a friendship or a family relationship that's not going in the right direction, and work our hardest to preserve those relationships that are so fundamental for all of us, because it costs a lot when we lose those. And so we really want to focus on how to build relationships if we can, if they're relationships that can be really helpful for us in our lives and that carry our story.
And one of the things that we suggested a number of times in Ensemble is doing just that, is reaching out to somebody you haven't talked to in a while. There's a story in our book of someone whose family hasn't, one branch of the family hasn't talked to the other branch of the family for a while. And of course, one person decides to be curious about it and get to the bottom of it. And what happens is there really is nothing, there is no reason there. It was tradition baked into that family ensemble to not engage with that particular side of the family. So these are things that I think resonate with a lot of people with regards to challenges that we've felt in engaging in different ensembles. And we give suggestions at the end of every chapter, things to try, things to do. So if you want to start out small, you can. If you want to start out big, depending on where you are on the scale of your ensembles. But the pandemic has really, and also the massive amount of social unrest with the murder of George Floyd, has really brought connection to the forefront with regards to who do we want to connect with, and what are our ensembles, and how do we make them stronger, and how do we take care of each other. Anything, Jeff, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I want to ask you a question. If I have no background in improvisation, I've never taken an improv class, I've never seen Whose Line Is It Anyway, I haven't done any improv, would I get this book?
Yes, I think you don't need to know anything about improvisation to get this book. Of course, I'm biased because I co-wrote it with you. I think this is about stuff that we do every day, and I think I said a little bit of this earlier, but it's stuff we do every day, but we haven't really thought about it in terms of it being a skill set. We haven't thought about our relationships as something that we can investigate and be curious about and maybe dig deeper on. We just don't move through the world that way. It's one of the reasons, shameless plug, I did a TEDx talk up in Napa Valley a number of years ago that was about teaching, and Jeff mentioned this earlier, about teaching improv in middle school or high school. In some countries they do. And in fact, in some countries you can letter in improv, which gives the kids who aren't jocks, don't have physical skills, a place where they can go and socialize and learn to tell stories and learn to engage. So we are advocates for improvisation as a life tool, because it is. We do improvise every day. We just don't think about it, and we don't know a lot about it because we associate it with performance and with comedy, and there's nothing wrong with that. Improv comedy is done very well for itself. But these same skills, these narrative skills, apply to how we can live a better, more full, more present life. So did I answer your question, Jeff?
You answered my question great. Should we open this up to the chat to see if there's any questions out there?
Hi guys, this has been great, and we don't have any questions yet in the chat, but if you're tuned in, it's not too late to ask. Drop them in, and I'll pass it on. I imagine while we give folks a minute, you guys have more to discuss, or how do you feel?
Sure.
Yeah.
I could ask Jeff a question. Can you think of a time where you've applied what, since you're not a professional improviser on stage in front of, you're not a comedy improviser, that you've applied stuff from Ensemble in your real life?
Yeah, so many times. I think I shared, I think, one of the more profound experiences I've had, but I think I carry what we're talking about inside my heart much of the time, in trying to remember all the time how sacred our relationships really are, and how valuable they are. And when we lose them in any way, because somebody said something that was a little hurtful, that maybe they didn't mean, that it causes us to lose part of our personal narrative. If we're lucky enough to know somebody maybe who went to elementary school with us, they know all our elementary school teachers. They have all the same pictures in their head that we have. In this way, we are ensembled, we're connected. So if you have a friend like that, or if you have the capacity or ability to connect with someone like that, what a gift. So I think some people are really masters at cherishing those relationships. Some others of us, we work at it really to make sure we keep thinking about it, and who we haven't talked to in a bit, or who we might really just shock or freak out if we sent them a message. And I've had, over the past year, the good fortune of reconnecting with people from my college freshman dorm who have become really an ensemble for me to talk with every week, and we've really supported each other through this crazy time. And if you can figure out those groups, it's just such a blessing.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you have inspired me many times, but we started talking about this during the pandemic, and I really felt compelled, especially since we're writing about this, to walk the walk. And I began calling or texting or emailing or reaching out over social media to a number of friends who I knew were alone during all this. People I know who don't have immediate family living near them, or who were, sheltering in place, by themselves. And one of the selfish things that happened was it made me feel good. It made them, I think, for the most part, feel good. Maybe some people, I don't know. But the idea of just connecting with other people and reaching out. I had a friend who I when we started writing this and wrote that suggestion down, I contacted him, and this is way back when, in the beginning of COVID, and he just got in touch with me about a month ago and was thanking me for reaching out then, because just somebody acknowledging, he was by himself, blah, 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 meant a lot to him, that he wasn't, suffering in isolation.
Yeah.
We have a couple questions, I think.
You want to take the first one?
Sure.
I know the questioner.
Yes. So Joanna writes, what are some of the most meaningful improv skills games that might help with loneliness, connection, increasing perspective taking? It's a great question. We've been playing games that are about storytelling and sharing stories. And we've done this a lot during this time with corporate groups that we've worked with online and sometimes with student groups, where we've asked somebody to tell a story that they've told many times before, with another person acting as their story coach. So just very briefly demonstrate it. Jeff's going to be my story coach. I'm going to tell a story that I've told many times, not very long, but he's going to say at the end of every sentence, either advance, which means to move the story along, color, which means give me some detail, or emotion, tell me what was happening emotionally. I'm going to leave room for him to interrupt me at the end of every sentence. So this is a story I've told many times before. When I was going to propose to my wife, I decided I was going to do it in this park in London.
Advance.
I walked her around the park for an hour trying to find the perfect place because she didn't know what I was going to do.
Color the park.
It was green, but it looked like a Christmas tree turned on its side because it had ice everywhere because it was New Year's Eve day.
Emotion.
I was sick to my stomach because I didn't know if she was going to say yes.
Advance.
I found a log in the middle of an ice field and asked her to sit down. Okay, we're going to stop there. But
She said yes.
She said yes. Thank goodness, yes. But we have a number of these narrative games that we play, and some that are in the book that are about just connection, about people finding out more about each other.
We could do the interview game real quick too and just demonstrate that.
Sure. Do you want to play me in a movie, or do you want me to play you in a movie?
You want to play me in a movie?
Sure.
Okay.
So we're just going to switch the pronouns. I'm playing Jeff in a movie, and so I'm going to ask him questions. He's going to answer saying you, but he is really talking about himself. So I'm really looking forward to playing this part. What was I like when I was 16?
Oh, you were a little bit self-conscious. You studied really, really hard. Sometimes you kind of buried yourself in books, really. But you also really liked to have a good time, and you did have a group of friends who you played some creative games with.
Did I have a favorite book or a favorite movie when I was 16?
Yeah, you loved Harold and Maude. You liked watching it over and over again. There was something about Maude that was so intriguing to you.
Did I buy a Cat Stevens record?
Oh, you listened to Cat Stevens over and over again. Yeah, sometimes you would even get teary-eyed.
Did I have a crush? Did I have a crush in school?
Yes, you did have a crush. You did. We can stop there. You get the point.
Yeah. So these games, which you don't have to be an improviser to play these games. Jeff is giving me honest answers about what he was like when he was 16. I'm telling you an honest story about when I proposed to my wife. This narrative builds knowledge, narrative builds relationships. Like we said before, every relationship is a story, and how well we tell that story directly correlates to how resonant that relationship is. There are more questions here.
Yeah.
You want to answer?
Yeah, from Shayna, thank you so much for being here, Shayna, and for all your help along the way in helping us to get this book out. And your wisdom. So the question is, what advice would you give to someone who's nervous about ensembling and who's not used to being the first one to reach out and start a conversation? So that's like a beautiful question. I want to say something first, which is about the research in improvisation and something called the Detroit Creativity Project, where they worked with kids with social anxiety, doing just a brief course in improvisation, and saw that their social anxiety symptoms actually reduced by over 40% just by participating in some improv games. So improvising and learning to improvise builds our resilience really, and makes it so that our anxiety can drop. So the first thing I would say is, like I've heard Dan say a time or two before, take an improv class. It's a really nice thing to do. But granted, that's a scary proposition for a lot of us, and reaching out to someone is a really scary proposition for all of us. And I think I would say it's important to think about what harm is going to come from it. What do we imagine could be really the downfall of reaching out to somebody? Would it be kind of helpful to rewrite our script a little bit? If I'm seeing myself as a person who doesn't reach out to somebody, might I wonder, can I play with the edges about that a little bit and rewrite my script? That's a lot of what our first book really was about, Life Unscripted. Dan, that's my first spontaneous reaction.
I'm going to take Amy's question. Hi,
Okay.
Amy. It's along the same lines. How would you offer suggesting using improv or ensemble with other people that you might have difficulties communicating with? Basically, how do you reach across the divide using what you have developed, learned in improv? And really listening, asking questions, and being an attentive listener. There's another book that we're going to plug another author while we're on, because Jeff and I have taken a deep dive into a lot of books on presence and relationships. And Patsy Rodenberg's book, The Second Circle, which is actually about presence, and she's a voice teacher, I think for the Royal Shakespeare Company. But she talks about the first, second, and third circles of energy. The first circle being siloed, introverted people who are not giving off anything and are very, very siloed. Third circle people are those people you're talking to at a party who look past you, and it's kind of like talking to somebody who's an aerosol can. You're getting sprayed with information, but nothing is being said to you. They're looking for someone else. But the second circle of energy is the circle of engagement, and that's the circle that I think, with regards to reaching across the divide, if I can be present and pay attention and not, flip back into being first circle or being internal and judging this person, if I can just have the conversation in the moment, my being in second circle is going to signal to that person, hopefully, that they can have a conversation with me. Now, that's not always the case, but one of the things that we do when we're teaching this work with teams and corporations is to talk about, because people always raise their hand and say, well, my boss or this guy or this person doesn't listen. And so what it does to me is it makes me withdraw, and I do less and less in the meeting. And what we prescribe is for people to stay in second and to stay curious and to stay present with that person. Eventually, and we've seen it happen, it's where that person will fall into second circle and be present because they realize that someone is really listening to them.
Yeah, if I can add to that a little bit, you can also imagine, or most of us have had the experience with our closest ensembles, the people that we're very closest to, and that divide can get really intense when we're mad about something, and that the resolution of that always involves trying to get the other person's perspective and what are they thinking and what are they feeling. So to cross a divide, really, I think always, as has been said by our president, involves walking in the shoes of another person and trying to get what life is like for them. And if we don't do that, we're never going to get there. It's not a guarantee that it will happen, but it's at least the right direction.
So I want to ask you a question, but hold on to the answer for a second. So this is your second book. This is from Rick. How does this new book dovetail with the previous book you wrote? So think about that for a second. And then I'm going to do, my brother is a paramedic in the city and has written in, and I'm just going to read this shameless plug for us. for my brother who's been a paramedic in the city for 20 years. As a paramedic for 20 years, I thought of myself as a very good listener and communicator, but after reading Life Unscripted, I found that there was a whole new avenue that I could go down with my patients. Things I thought I knew already. So you helped me to be a better caregiver. Thank you both. You rock. So that's for my brother, Anthony. But
thank you, Anthony. Thank you.
Thanks, Anth. But in fact, originally this book was going to be about doctor-patient relationships. We were very sort of, we wanted to talk about that level of engagement and what that means. Anyway, I digress. So Rick and Jeff, maybe you can answer this question. How does our second book dovetail with our first book?
Yeah, our first book really is about unscripting ourselves and understanding who we think we are and trying to move beyond the edges of that and undo the patterns of who we think we are. So many of us may have been told you're not a good athlete, and so we don't ever go to the gym, or you can't sing, or you should be this. But we're talking using the guidelines really from improvisation about how we can move beyond who we've come to know ourselves as. And we talk quite a bit in that book also about an internal judge that we call Buddy, who really keeps us in check and doesn't let us move beyond who we think we are, and how to greet Buddy and work with Buddy and try to expand our sense of who we think we are. This book really is about who we are in our relationships and how we can think about our relationships that are closest to us, and our work relationships, our friendships, our communities, our families, and how we operate in those relationships, how we show up, and how we get curious about other people. So in psychological lingo, this is a little bit more of an intersubjective book, in that we're really involved with, in this book, with thinking about how we impact others and how we are all ultimately connected. And that if we can really internalize that idea, that's the ultimate anti-loneliness guide, to remember that we're all connected.
I think it's so important, and Jeff has said it a number of times tonight, that how we show up. I think before we started doing this work, even though, I'd been teaching improv for 20 years by that point when we first started writing, but it's made me think a great deal about how we show up and how we interact. And I know, and I don't think my wife would mind me saying this, I know it's improved my relationship with regards to what listening looks like, what listening is, when does somebody feel listened to. I know that when I've met somebody for the first time and I feel that they're really listening to what I'm saying, it changes the dynamic. It's like suddenly we've shifted into fifth, and there's an openness and a flow in the engagement. I don't think we think very much about how we listen to people and how we engage with others. We're moving so quick, and I took a yoga class this morning, and the teacher was reading from the Tao and said, soft will always overcome hard. In other words, and slow will always overcome fast. And to me, it related to Jeff and I's work, and also to improvisation, in terms of the note that I give students more than any other note is slow down. And I think that same thing is true with regards to, I just finished teaching engineers for a few months who are, very literal and bottom line. I'm generalizing, of course, but the thing that I felt was important was to slow down and to respond to each other rather than react. And just that little lexicon shift led to, more listening, more engaged listening in terms of the work we were doing. Anything you want to add to that, Doctor?
That's great. Any other thoughts or questions out there? If we were with you live, we'd have you turn to each other and do a little improv games show you this is really fun and not scary stuff. Yeah.
That's really fun, and I love that respond to as opposed to react. Very rich stuff, you guys. Thank you, and congratulations on the book. This has been a wonderful conversation. I feel like I learned a lot just from hearing you guys talk tonight. So maybe I was doing some decent listening. Thank you both.
Evan, thanks so much for having us.
Yes,
And
thank you.
to everybody at Booksmith.
Yes.
Our pleasure. And everyone tuned in, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you get the book. If you haven't already, the link is just beneath the video. Hope to see you all in person in the nearest future. But until then, please stay safe and take care. Hopefully see you at a upcoming virtual event. Thank you all.
Thanks everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thanks very much.